Hello and welcome to the Everything Trackside podcast for a special interview episode. My name is Seán, joined by Mairead tonight for the most part, all Irish podcast, because we are joined by Daly, former Formula One driver from Dublin. Good evening, Derek. How are you?
I am very good. Thank you for inviting me here. This is a pleasure.
It's a pleasure for us as well, as I'm sure you can appreciate. We're absolutely delighted to have you on. Coops, perfect timing. Jump back in. Very good timing. Well done. So we've got three Irish and a Scot, so we're well represented here. I was just saying there, as you may be aware, Derek, we went through a bit of a rebrand ourselves this year, so we've had a bit of a relaunch, as it were, with formerly Everything F1, now Everything Trackside, because we very much wanted to kind of highlight that we cover much more than just Formula One across all of our platforms, all the feeder series, all the I suppose the alternative series, IndyCar in particular. We would cover kart if it was still a thing. I'm for sure we'll be chatting about that in a while as well. We're also getting into WEC and superbikes and everything, so very much Everything Trackside. So this is great for us. This is our third podcast episode under this new guise. And we're really, really excited to have you on. So I suppose the first thing I want to start with, for anyone who might not be familiar with you, because a lot of our listeners are from, I suppose, the new age of F1 fans, the Drive to Survive era, which we're very happy with, because I think it's brought a lot of attention, particularly in Ireland, to motorsport. But give us your background.
So I was 12 years of age in Dundrum, jumping off the bus after school one day. My dad sold vegetables out of a corner shop in Wickham Park in Dundrum. I'm walking home and I see this British registered truck with Sydney Taylor Racing written on the side of it. I go to my dad and said, there must be a racing car in that. He said, the lady who lives there buys her groceries here, and it's her brother, Sydney Taylor, and you can see the car that's in there at 7:00 that night. I go back at 7. They open the door and here's a white Brabham BT8 sports car with a green stripe down the middle of it, an Irish shamrock on the door. I actually got to touch it. And then my dad says, I'll take you to see it race tomorrow in a place called Dunboyne. I'd never heard of Dunboyne, but it wasn't too far away. We go out, we sit on the grass bank. There's no safety fences back in those days. And the noise and the smell and the color and the screeching and the burnt rubber and everything that I saw that day literally changed my life, changed the direction. I told my dad right there and then, I'm going to be a professional racing driver. Now, Seán, remember, in those days, we didn't even have a racing circuit in Ireland.
No, of course. That would have been before the Mondello Park days.
Yeah, there was nothing on television that you would see. And so that was a pretty audacious plan when I was 12. That's what I was going to do. And that was the start of it. And from then on, everything I did was sort of mission focused on how can I become a racing driver? And there was just unbelievable things happened along the way to Formula One.
Fantastic. I suppose tell us a bit about that, because obviously you don't just go from a 12-year-old looking at I've just looked it up, it's an absolutely gorgeous car. I'll flash an image of it here for anyone watching us on YouTube, so you could probably understand the immediate love affair, I'm sure, with that sort of car. For me, it was the 1998 McLaren. I had a model of it when I was about 6 years old. Completely besotted. I still think it's one of the best looking cars in history. So I get that 100%. But so what was the steps? So obviously you plugged in, you were right. This is my goal. This is my dream. I'm sure a lot of racing drivers, both in Formula One and other series, would echo the same sort of thing, that, you know, they plugged in. We obviously know quite well, like Lewis Hamilton's story and stuff like that, going up to Ron Dennis and saying, I'm going to drive for you in 8 years' time. So what were the steps to get there? What were the kind of the series and the progression that you had to go to get to Formula One?
So Santry stock cars was the first thing. Small little dirt oval. I was 16, bought a car and crashed it and bashed it and painted it and fixed it and crashed it and bashed it, did all the normal things for about 3 years, I think. At the end of that, myself and friend David Kennedy, also from Dundrum, who wanted to race Formula Ford, said we need a chunk of money. The only way we could get it somewhat legally was to become labourers in the iron ore mines of Australia. Off we went, packed up, heavy labour, 24-hour day shifts at times because you could get paid triple time. Did our 6 months, came back to Ireland with £5,000. Never saw as much money. And so we had enough money to buy a Formula Ford. Buy one, off we go again, crashing, bashing, learning. No school, no racing school, no mentors, no mechanics apprenticeship, nothing. Just two fellas, just going to learn as we go. And that was 1975 when I came back. The car I bought was a Crosley 25F. Wasn't good enough. Crashed it and destroyed it at Mondello in the middle of the season. Met a fella called John Crosley who built the cars in Belfast. He said, I'll take the wreck of your Crosley 25F and give you a brand new Crosley 30F in replacement, but you have to buy a new engine. I had no money. David Kennedy still has some money left from Australia. I said, will you loan me the money to buy an engine? Which he did. Bought one, sent it up to Crosley. There was 11 races left in the championship. I scored 11 pole positions, 10 wins, 1 second, won the championship, and suddenly the rocket ship took off. Went to England in the next year, 76. Bought an old bus, an old tour bus that was no longer used. That was going to be a motorhome, a workshop, everything we needed. 23 races in England that year. Oof. Won the Formula Ford Festival at the end of the year, which happened to be called Tribute to James. It was sponsored by Marlboro. James Hunt had just become world champion, and they decided to call the Formula Ford Festival Tribute to James. I go there, it's piss and rain, perfect Irish weather, slapped and schlepped all the way through the heat, semi-finals, won everything, won the final, go up onto the podium and meet James Hunt. He hands me the trophy, and that was November in 1976. 18 months later, I was on the grid in Formula One and qualified beside James Hunt at Brands Hatch.
Wow.
Okay, so let me fill in the blank that will blow you away now in the middle. In the middle of all this, I met a fellow called Derek McMahon. He was a Donegal businessman, had an interest in racing. And at the end of my Formula Ford season in 1975, I was racing at Kirkstone in the north. A fella tells me, if you want support to go race in England, why don't you go over and talk to a fella? He's at the bar right now. His name is Derek McMahon. He's a big fella. You can't miss him. I go over there. He's big and he's loud and he's boisterous and he's holding court at the bar. And I walk up as a shy fella from Dublin, tap him on the shoulder. He turns around and me in my best elevator speech that you can have, trying to, mumble through some marketing thing. I'm Derek Daly. I'm from Dublin. I'm going to try and go to England. I'm going to try and become a professional. Would you have an interest in helping me? And he took a deep breath and he wipes his nose a bit and he says, hey, I need a fucking 6-inch hole in my head. With that, he turns around, he starts drinking again. I turn around, went off, never heard from him again until 2 weeks after I won the festival. I get a call. He says, meet me at the Dorchester Hotel in London for the BRDC dinner dance. And we'll have a chat about maybe helping you move to Formula 3. Because he remembered the conversation. He wasn't prepared to do it unless I proved I had the desire and commitment to make the move. And after winning a whole load of races and winning the festival, he said, okay, I'll give you a chance. And that was huge. I get a Formula 3 car. We start the British Championship. Everything's going well. And at the Austrian Grand Prix Formula 3 support race, I qualify on the pole beside Nelson Piquet. I'm sitting in the car, strapped in, ready to go onto the grid. Derek McMahon, Big D, has his foot up on the right front wheel. And this old guy, sort of with a limp and a shuffle, went across the nose cone of my car and said something to Big Derek. Big Derek comes down and says to me, that fella there said that if you win this race, he'd put you into a Formula One car by the end of the year. I said, who was it? He said, some fella called Sidney Taylor. Do you remember when I was 12 years of age and I'm walking home from school and there's a truck in our neighborhood, Sidney Taylor Racing on the side of the truck?
Wow, talk about full circle.
12 years later, he's the guy that says, if you win this race, I'll put you in a Formula One car.
Wow.
I went out, had a barnstormer against Nelson Piquet, won the race. 6 weeks later, I was testing a Formula One car at Goodwood in England. Unbelievable story of how the rocket ship took off and how fast it went.
That is some story. So you found your Ron Dennis then in Big D. I want to drive to you. You want my help. And he goes, right, we'll prove it. And you go back and do so. Exactly.
It was an unbelievable time. And then winning races leads you to the introduction to more people who say, well, look, if you just won the British F3 Championship. At that time, if you won the British F3 Championship, it was the number one F3 championship in the world. Everybody that won that championship ended up in Formula One. And after I came back from Austria, having won against Nelson Piquet. I won the last 5 races in a row in England. I mean, just dominated. Sometimes I didn't have the fastest car, but I always got the best start. And if I got ahead, nobody was going to get by me. It was one of those things that I was so on top of my game. And then towards the end of the year, I met a fella called Guy Edwards. Guy Edwards was a British racing driver who was really, he was the godfather of sponsorship, I believe, in England at the time. He put all the big deals together, from Canon to Silk Cut and sports cars to Camel at Williams. And I met him, and he had a Formula 2 team at the time backed by ICI. And having just won the F3 championship, I got a call out of the blue. Hey, would you like to do a Formula 2 race, the last round of the championship in Estoril? I'd never heard of Estoril. I'd never been to Spain. I never saw a Formula 2 car, never mind a Formula 2 race. I arrived in the paddock, no practice, no testing, nothing. Went out in the first practice session. I qualified ahead of Ron Dennis's cars, and he walked down to our pit. He says, if Daly did that time, I'll eat my hat. The next day went even faster, ended up finishing 5th and set the fastest lap of the race. And so suddenly Guy Edwards took an interest in me. He says, I'll help your career. And it was him that negotiated my Formula 2 contract for 1978. And in that race, the 5th race was at Mugello. I won it. The 6th race was at Vallelunga. I won it. And then 2 days later, I got a call from Team Ensign. Would I want to drive a Formula 1 car at the British Grand Prix?
Wow.
Jumped at it, qualified 15th, right beside James Hunt in the McLaren. 18 months after he gave me the Formula Ford in the rain at Brands. It's an unbelievable story, really.
That's an amazing path to F1. I wonder how long it took Ron Dennis to get the taste of hat out of his mouth after that.
Right, exactly. And at that time, the fastest rise from Formula Ford to Formula 1 was Emerson Fittipaldi. He did it in 18 months. I did it in 13 months. Still today, it's still the fastest rise today from Formula Ford.
It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it was a rocket ship that took off. Ironically, I'm easily able to recall these stories because I'm not quite finished yet. My autobiography is being published by Evro in England, and it's coming out in May. So all these stories all got captured over the last couple of years, because it's unbelievable. Most people, you tell them it happened, they'd say, no, it can't happen.
So do you think my fiance, whose birthday is in May, will be annoyed if I buy her your autobiography for me?
No. I think you should definitely do it. And in May, we'll have a book signing somewhere in Dublin, so you'll have to come to that.
Certainly wouldn't miss it.
Derek, what's your favourite memory, I suppose, from your Formula 1 days? What really stands out?
The best car that I remember was the Tyrrell, the 010 Tyrrell in 1980. Only because it handled well. It wasn't the fastest car, but it handled really well. It gave you great confidence in the car. You know, Monaco in 1982, I was about to start the last lap in the lead when the gearbox broke. And so that was a highlight, but was it a great memory? I don't know. I mean, I see the video of the car stopped and I step out of the car, and I didn't know at that time that that's the last time I'd ever race in Monaco. You know, because I lived there at the time. And so, you know, that was a highlight, but was it a great memory? I don't know. I think the best memory for me would be 1978 on my Grand Prix debut in Brands Hatch, in the Ensign. And I have a great picture of Big D, Derek McMahon, standing right beside me as I get in the car. And Gary Gibson, my best friend, who I bought a Formula Ford car from only 2 years earlier. And they're both standing there because they were the two who lived every day with me. So I wanted them right there. And so that probably would be my favorite photograph, and arguably my favorite memory of Formula 1.
I'm sure, even just hearing about your path to Formula 1, it's pretty hard to pick one. I was going to ask, would your final race have been one? Because obviously you scored a point in your final race, which ended up being, if I'm not wrong, both yourself and Tommy Byrne's final race, the Caesars Palace Grand Prix in 82.
Yeah.
Technically, the last time an Irishman, a true Irishman, sorry, Eddie Irvine and Ralph Furman, scored a point in F1. And obviously, you still hold the record for the most amount of points ever scored by an Irishman in F1.
Yeah. I remember Vegas well. It was a bit of a dump of a racetrack, you know, made with concrete blocks around the car park at Caesars Palace. It was very hot. It was very bumpy. I remember, 3 laps to go in the brake zones when it's bumpy. I was dizzy. So I was desperately trying to focus because I was so dehydrated. I was dizzy. I could see I was catching Kecky because, the cars got closer and closer. So, but at that stage, at the back of my mind, I sort of knew I wasn't going to stay there the following year. Things were in a bit of turmoil for me. So it wasn't really a memorable race. Although that night we did fly in a private jet, Mansur OJ's private jet, back to Los Angeles to help him celebrate his birthday, which was on that day. So it was a pretty cool ending to my Grand Prix career. But not really what you would call a warm, fuzzy standout memory.
Obviously, Vegas back then is very different to Vegas now, which is in the middle of the night in a desert. So it's like 2 degrees and they're all freezing to death.
Yeah. And you know what, quite frankly, I don't know why they still run that late. Yeah, there's some logic that says the hotel casinos needed to be run at that particular time, but it doesn't make any sense to me.
Certainly wasn't for the benefit of the broadcasters, that's for sure.
No.
Yeah.
Coops, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, just I've got a quick question. You talked about having the people around you that were with you throughout your career. Is that something that you would advocate when you speak to young people to make sure they have the right people around you, especially going through motorsport in this kind of generation?
I didn't understand a word you said. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So you bring up a really interesting point, because I tell people your net worth is your network. There is nobody, even today, there's nobody good enough to just magically appear and do it yourself. You have to build your network, because your network plugs into their network and yours expands, because you absolutely need to meet the key people who will see you at a key time in your career and they will say, I'll help you take the next step. I'll give you a test in this car. I'll introduce you to this sponsor over here, this team owner, this team member. So it is one of the absolute most important things a young driver can do, is learn how to sell yourself, how to introduce yourself, how to converse with an adult, how to converse with an engineer, even though you're 12 or 13 or 14 years of age. And quite frankly, I was terrible at that. We didn't grow up with any formal training of how to do anything like that. Nor did we grow up in an era where you had managers or coaches or dietitians, and that's why the age of the drivers now is so much lower than it was in our day, because they're prepared at a much higher level, because they can develop this network around them that helps get them right on the sharp edge of performance years earlier than we were able to do. We didn't even have racing schools. I mean, when I bought my first Formula Ford, I'd never been in one. You talk about, wear a fire suit. What was that? We wore jeans and a jacket and an anorak. Your racing boots were some, cloth boots you borrowed from your sister when she wasn't wearing it. Because we couldn't afford to buy stuff like that. Back then, you could go through scrutineering. It was pretty basic. If the throttle return spring worked on your carburetor, you passed tech, and that was it. It was all fairly basic.
Do you think, obviously, you went through a lot. You talked about going to Australia, which must have been a fair trek back in the day. It's a fair enough trek as it is today. Do you think social media nowadays has helped or hindered that? Because we see the likes of, let's take some young Irish drivers. You see Max Hart, he's pushing really, really hard. He's got himself a good social media follow. He's got the likes of O'Driscoll's Whiskey sponsoring him. But I came across a young driver called Kaylee Cole a couple of weeks ago, a young Irish driver, pushing to get, she's in GB4, she's pushing to get into Formula Academy, and she's trying to build up this social media following because that's what sponsors want. So I suppose, double-sided question. Do you think that's helped because they can build this platform, or is it hindered because at the end of the day, whoever has the most money can just go buy followers themselves and they don't even need followers to get sponsors?
I think it's good and bad. It's good because people learn your name. Like Max Hart. I didn't know Max Hart until he started to grow this social media network. Alex Dunne has a social media network that's getting very, very active. Now, I happen to have known Alex Dunne for a long, long time, but I think it's good. It does get the word out, but you have to manage it so unbelievably carefully because it can turn on you so quickly. boy, I tell you, it's a mental test for people when social media turns on them, because it's really hard to ignore or really hard to forget what people say on social media.
It certainly is. We even saw like Lewis Hamilton, the statistically greatest Formula One driver ever, had a tough year in Ferrari and went completely MIA off social media over the winter break because it was even for him, someone who's been doing it for so long and has X million followers. He needed a break. It was too much. Let's be fair, the shit he got on for a poor year in Ferrari was too much for even him. So it's not unique to junior drivers. It affects at all levels.
Yep. And unfortunately, it's not going to get better for Lewis Hamilton. I'm sorry. I hate to say it. He is the greatest of all time. He took performing to a level never seen before, both on and off the track. But the glory days are over, and it's nothing to do with talent. It's father time. You're not 40-year-old guys are not going to beat these 18-year-olds. It just won't happen in any sport. I don't care if it's football, if it's tennis, it doesn't matter. Time catches up with everybody.
It certainly does. And obviously we've got the likes of Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, who looks like he's aging backwards at sometimes. It will catch them all. And we had the likes of like Michael Schumacher had his comeback that wasn't obviously as illustrious, and Kimi Räikkönen and stuff like that. It happens all the time. But in your own career, when was that moment for you? Because obviously when you moved out of F1, you moved over you went to America. You were quite successful in the series over there. You went on to win in Sebring twice. Was it back-to-back in Sebring? Yeah. Very, very impressive. So I suppose two parts there. One, what was that transition like away from Formula One and into the American series? And at what point did you think, okay, this is where my career needs to pivot off track?
Yeah. So my life, my career, all the different avenues I took, none of them were planned. I was just a spontaneous thinker and reactor. Boom, let's go do it. And so at the end of Formula One in 1982, the last IndyCar race of the year was 4 weeks after Formula One. I got a call out of the blue, would you like to race in Phoenix in an IndyCar? Hey, I'd never seen an IndyCar. I had no idea where Phoenix was. I jumped at the chance. I go to Phoenix, and I tell people, a Formula One car from 0 to 100 miles an hour is faster than an Indy car. But an Indy car from 100 miles an hour to 200 miles an hour is much faster than a Formula One car. And this was a beast of a thing with more power than I'd ever had. I thought, I'd like to race at the Indy 500. And that was my only thought. Race at the Indy 500 and then leave. I go there in 1983. I met some people, as Coops says, build a network. But I met a lot of people that I didn't know at the time, got on really well, loved America and always did. And thought, I can handle this. So loved the Indy 500 for the first time, got contracted for 1984. But then I was all but killed in an IndyCar crash that derailed me for... I was in therapy for 3 years. I had 19 significant operations, all the bone grafting, skin grafting, rebuilding. All the stuff you never want. And I'd never been hurt in my life. And during that time, this gets to your second question. So during that time, the question is from friends, are you going to go back racing? Like it almost killed you. And an even more pointed question was, why would you ever even consider going back racing again? Which is a difficult question to answer until you realize the day when I was 12 and I went to Dunboyne with my dad and I told him I wanted to become a professional racing driver, he told me two things. He said, I'll help you in every possible way, as long as it isn't financial help you need. I knew exactly what that meant. But he also said, you'll be responsible for the legacy that you leave in the sport. Nothing to me. Went over the top of my head until this accident. And then I realized I would never want this to be the legacy that I would leave. So I had to recover. I had to become a racing driver again. I had to force myself to physical therapy, whatever it was, because I wanted to control the legacy I left myself. And so it took me 2.5 years to get back to full-time racing, which is IndyCar. That was 87, then 88, 89. I then got an opportunity to race with Jaguar and Nissan in the heyday of sports car racing in America, which was great, loved it. And with Nissan, went and won the Sebring 12-hour race 1990. And here's the key to your question. I'm on the podium, campaign, everybody jumping up and down, Yahoo, we did a great job. My wife at the time said, well, that's great. You guys won. And I said, who really cares unless you tell them? And I knew then that win was the beginning of the end of my racing career, because the chase for me to get back racing, the buzz of the chase was more than the buzz of the success when I got there. That's when I knew it was time for the next move in my career. And so I raced again the following year in sports cars again. We won a load of races, won Sebring again. And I told my team manager, I'm going to finish at the end of this year. So just start planning on who you're going to replace me with. He came to me and says, do you know that nobody has ever won the Sebring 12-hour race 3 times in their only 3 starts? Why don't you stay on and do Daytona for us, do Sebring, and then call it a day? I said, good with me. And so 1982, I did 2 races, but I was already in television broadcasting at the time. When I got hurt and I was in a wheelchair in IndyCar, I did an interview with ESPN, our big sports channel in America. That interview turned into a 10-year contract. By accident, my own accident. I started a television
Not a bad
broadcasting
accident.
career. But suddenly I was doing television and racing at the same time. So when I stopped racing, I already had a broadcasting career already established. And believe it or not, I got an adrenaline kick from live television broadcasts, a bit like I had when I was in the car. And I had no formal training, nothing, just thrown right in. You're a television commentator. No formal training, but a bit of the gift of the gab of the Irish went a long way for me, and a whole new career opened up, and I never missed racing for a day after I stopped.
Mairead, you had one there.
I do. I have. You're speaking of legacy, and I suppose there is a big legacy in Irish motorsport as well. And we did lose Eddie Jordan last year. And I know you got to test a Jordan F1 car 2004, I think it was. You got to test it.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about your experience with that, and if you've any good memories of Eddie himself?
Well, I bought my very first racing car from Eddie Jordan.
Wow.
I'm not actually surprised because
Yeah.
Eddie's just that guy.
That's a very Eddie thing.
Yeah, Eddie was a likeable rogue. So he lived in Rathfarnham. We were in Dundrum. It was Daly Kennedy who introduced me to Eddie. We'd go over there, this Lotus 61 sitting on the back of a trailer, and I negotiated to pay him £400 and my Ford Anglia that I had at the time. And so his deal for me was he was going to give me the Lotus 61. There was no engine in it, but he promised me the use of an Alden tuned engine. Alden was an English a Formula 4 tuning company. He promised me that he was going to negotiate the use of an Alden tuned engine for me to use for the season. He had no intention of ever doing anything like that, but he knew he had my cash and he had my Ford Anglia, and off we went. But so he was a likable rogue. We became the best of friends. We raced against each other all through Formula Ford. He did Atlantic when I went off to England, and I went off to America, and obviously did F1 on the way. But Eddie was a likable rogue. He was the best thing to happen in Formula One. He brought color. He brought a bit of a lifestyle to Formula One that it didn't have. And he wasn't afraid. He was a great deal maker. I didn't probably realize how revered he was in Formula One until he died. Until you see the number of people that turned up at the celebration of life in London. Who's anybody in the music business in Formula One turned up to say goodbye. I didn't quite realize, because I was gone, remember, at that stage. But the last time I saw him was in Baku. I was the Formula One driver steward in Baku. And I'm just sitting at my desk doing stuff. And he barges in the door and he comes and says, "Hey, Paddy." You always called me "Hey, Paddy." And he just sits down. "What's going on? What are you doing? How are your kids?" And I said the same to him. And he tells me about all his kids, what they're doing. They're into design. They're all over the world, blah, blah, blah. And then he just packs up his stuff and leaves. But he was a great man for that connection. Anyway, and go back to the Formula One car very quickly. So when I did one track test a year after I stopped racing. Started with the Williams, and I did Indy cars. I did the Ligier Formula One car, did the Ferrari sports car, all sorts of stuff. Just happened by accident again. My track tests, I did one a year just to keep me current for television and broadcasting. And I had access to them. I was still a name. I was still trusted. But the track test went to 17 countries in 12 different languages eventually. The last one I did was the Jordan F1 car. And we did a television documentary about what it would be like as a non-current Formula One driver, just to jump straight into a Formula One car and see what it was like. So fairly basic. But I went to Eddie and I said, hey, you owe me. And you owe me. So what about letting me track test your car? Which he did and got a great kick out of it. And it wasn't really payback because it was all fun and games. But it's a great story. Eddie's a great guy. It was the last Formula One car, last racing car I drove. Because believe it or not, I usually do about 25 laps in whatever car I test. In those 25 laps, I couldn't see fast enough or think fast enough. I couldn't process the road and the bushes and the guardrails going by me as fast as they did. And I'm in the middle of the test, screaming this engine down through the gears at Silverstone when I say to myself, this is the last racing car I'll ever drive because the racing car is ahead of me. I can't get ahead of the racing car. And if the racing car was ahead of me, I'm in the danger zone. And that was the last track test I ever did. And one of the best ones I did.
So that's not a bad one because that presumably would have been a V10 car, would it not?
It was a...
I can hear it. I can hear it in my ears right now.
It's online. I have a YouTube channel, Daly Keynote. Daly Keynote Speaker. Yeah, the Jordan test is on there. And there's another one, Daly Family. But you'll find it. It's on YouTube. It's really good. It was a great thing. Great fun to do it.
I will. If you're watching this on YouTube in particular, I will find that and link that down below because I definitely dig that one up. Coops, you had a question for Derek there.
I did. It was actually going back to your broadcast. What was it that brought you to broadcasting? You kind of touched on, you kind of signed a deal again. It's the kind of theme of your story is everything's an accident in a good way. But what was it about it, analysing the race from like the commentary booth that was different? And did the racing, the fact that you were a racer, help you just to see what was coming?
Yes. And so after you're a racing driver, you have to find something to do. And I wasn't good at anything except maybe having a bit of a chat about what was going on racetrack, because that's what I knew. That's what I loved. That's what I participated in. And so I found it easy to tell the story. And television is all about paint the picture, tell the story of what goes on. And I'd got an adrenaline kick out of it. It was like I was behind the wheel without the danger element attached to it. And of course, then you get on television and then it feeds your ego. And then you want to get better. And then you want to tell more stories. And then you know how to bring the audience into the storyline at a much higher level than a producer, because he never raced. And so suddenly you had the freedom to help build the story and tell the story and where should you put the cameras. And then you get into interviews, with famous people. And you can literally ask them anything. So I was trusted enough that no matter what question I asked, they never considered it to be an ambush. So, for example, I could give you an example. I was Sylvester Stallone's driver coach before he did the movie Driven. And so I spent 6 days with him as his personal coach, because he's a boxer at heart. So Rocky, he knows exactly how to play it. When he did the movie of an IndyCar driver called Driven, he wanted to spend time behind the wheel. So we had a racing school in Las Vegas at the time. So it was Emerson Fittipaldi that recommended Stallone come to our school. So I spent 6 days with him. And by the way, he was arguably the worst student we ever had. But he was a $50 million a movie guy at the time, because his mind was so active. He forgot everything you taught him the day before. But you could see the way his mind worked. And what he was doing is working out how to tell the story, not necessarily act 100% as a driver in the story. But the question about interviewing, I did a documentary about the making of the movie. We went to the Peterson Museum in Los Angeles to meet Stallone and Rennie Harlan, his director. And so to give you an idea how stars like that protect themselves from an ambush question, before we sat down, I was told you got 15 minutes with them. Now, remember, we'd just flown across America with a full production crew to try and get 60 minutes of content for a documentary. But the first question I ask him is I give him softball questions to make him feel like a star before I set up to ask him the difficult questions. But he knows when I set him up in a good light, I'm not going to ambush him. And he sits back, he opens up, and he'll tell you everything. And I use the same tactic with every big name that I ever interviewed. Don't ambush them. Make them feel like the big star in the interview, and you can take them anywhere. And so you see the type of education I was getting on television was a whole new world where I was beginning to be able to project myself as a leader in the industry now in television and draw in other people and build storylines. And so it was a big kick. And I went on for like 24 years.
Suppose after this, your next big step after broadcasting is surely becoming the dad of a racer and becoming a racing dad as such. How are you as a racing dad? Are you nervous? Does it scare you or is it exciting?
No, it doesn't scare me. I have been scared, but in general, it doesn't. And so when Connor was 10, we were at the go-kart track and he just says one day, he says, could I have a go? And so he jumped in and it was the most natural thing for him. You didn't have to teach him lines. It was just easy for him. And so I became his coach and his mentor. I mean, I'd been through it, so you have half an idea what it takes. It's not easy being a dad and trying to coach. And eventually the dad factor got in the way and he had to take his own steps, his own decisions, move his own way. And I think that was the best thing for him. But it's not easy. It's an unusual. I don't know whether it's ever worked. It might have, but it's a difficult thing. But I never see. I never get. I get anxious, but not really nervous. And people say, well, what did you say to him? Did you say, oh yeah, go be a racing driver? I said, no. When he said he wanted to be a professional racing driver, I said something a little bit different than my own dad. I said, I'll help you in every possible way, but you need to pull me through the sport. I'm not going to pull you. This is too big a commitment, too much sacrifice, too dangerous. I don't need to live vicariously through you. But if you pull me through the sport, I'll help you in every possible way. And that was sort of an important foundation, if you like, for me to set with him. But he's the hardest working guy I know in racing. I mean, he hasn't had the consistency of the same good team year in, year out, always trying to find something new. But he learns so much. You learn how to be a businessman. He's very good on television. He's got a great social media following. And so down the road, whenever his driving career is over, that'll be a platform for him to fall into whatever the next level of career that he does.
Maybe we'll have him on next.
Yeah.
It would be great.
He'll do it.
Just a question. You mentioned your YouTube is a kind of multiple speak. I think you said it's Daly motivational speaker or something on YouTube. So you do motivational speaking. So my question is, what did you learn from the racing side of things that allowed you to then move into that kind of motivational speaking and obviously your broadcasting side of it?
Yeah. And again, it has become another career. And I don't need another career, but my mother always told me, every day you wake up, have purpose in your life. And my purpose is to try and share the high performance principles of the sport with corporate America. My mother, by the way, is 97, still alive, still healthy, still living by herself. An Irish great-grandmother, loves racing, and still asks me every day, what's going on, what's happening.
My great-grand lasted to 99 in a very, very similar scenario. She went out in her own house when she was a bit bored of it all.
Yeah.
Good Irish granny.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, so quick recap how I fell into this keynote speaking. I don't know whether you remember a South African female called Desiree Wilson. Desiree Wilson was probably the best female racing driver I've ever seen, and made it to Formula One, drove for Tyrrell at the South African Grand Prix in 1979, I think it was. Anyway, came to the Indy 500. She was my teammate, tried to qualify for Indy, had terrible equipment, but she was asked to go speak at a luncheon in Indianapolis, and she was so nervous, she asked me to go with her for moral support. I go there. She gets up. She says, I'm Desiree Wilson. I'm from South Africa. My dad had a van. We bought tires. We bought a go-kart. We had tools. We did this. We did. And I thought, well, my story's better than that. So she got a big round of applause. And the MC at the time at the lunch said, Derek, would you like to say anything? Now, remember, here's a guy who, if the teacher in school would ever said, Daly, you answer the question, I would freeze. I'd go red-faced. I would freeze. I wouldn't have two words to string together. I was just a basic shy boy from Dublin. When he asked me at the dinner, Derek, would you like to say anything? I said, yes, I would. I get up. I start to go over a bit of my story, all the stuff that we talked about here. I got a rousing round of applause, and something at the back of my mind says, you know what? You can do this. And then I got invited to another lunch. I said, yeah, I'll do it. And somebody said, hey, we'll pay you to speak at our lunch. Pay me? What? And then I ended up meeting an agent who said, hey, we'll represent you for keynote speaking. For what? I knew nothing about it. But suddenly I had the platform to share the high performance principles of motorsports with corporate America, and they loved it. You tell me a corporation doesn't want to understand speed, agility, and flawless execution. There's Formula One right there. And so now it's a big kick for me to be able to stand in front of these audiences and get a round of applause, right? Get a standing ovation. It strokes your ego. And as my mother rightly says, it gives you purpose in your day. But can you imagine all these years later, I'm still in a position to share the sport with people who probably have never touched it?
I suppose that's the next question is that where your book comes in? Is that the autobiography, the elongated story of what we've only probably touched on in the last hour?
Yes. So 25 years ago, I'm on an airplane flying across America, sit down beside this lady, and we strike up a conversation. Had no idea who she was. And the more questions I answered, the more questions she had. And we just got deeper and deeper into all sorts of experiences that I went through. And I think she's just interested in me. We finish the flight. I get up. I go to say goodbye to her. She reaches over, puts her hand on my arm, and she says, I'm a publisher, and you need to write a book. And that set a seed 25 years ago. And about 6 or 7 years ago, a friend of mine here, who is an ex-jet ski world champion, he's an engineer in motor racing. He's from Australia, fascinated. We often sit down and talk about the old days. And he said to me, you've got to capture this. It'll be lost forever. And so I started to just put down chapters and headlines, fill it in. And over the last 5 years, captured all of these amazing stories. Went to a publisher in England, Evro, and they're going to publish it next May. So it's called Serial Survivor, the perfect name on a book for someone like me who went from crisis to crisis without a plan and ended up getting to extraordinary places that people can only dream of most of the time.
Amazing. And where can people get their hands on it? By which you mean, when can I get my hands on it?
I don't know yet. But I'm sure it'll be Amazon. I don't know what else. We're in the stage right now where we're arranging what the book signings might look like in Dublin in May. So I'm sure there'll be one at Mondello. There'll be one somewhere else in Dublin. So we'll all be connected after this, and we'll all make sure everybody knows where it is. But it'll be a fascinating, especially for anybody from Ireland who's remotely interested in the sport. And now you know a little bit about me from today, so we can just fill in more of those blanks. But some of the stuff we got up to back in the day, you couldn't get away with it these days. Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to give this a read now.
So excited.
Mairead, you had another one there.
I did. I suppose you mentioned there that you're talking about having a signing in Mondello Park, and I know you were there during the summer with Alex Dunne and everything. Are you excited for the future of Irish motorsport and where it's going? And can you see the big change since, I suppose, Max Hart, Phil McLaughlin, Alex Dunne have shone a light on motorsport?
Yeah. And Alex Dunne is the one I'm most familiar with. You know why? I raced against his granddad, Matt Dunne, when I was 16 in stock cars in Santry on the dirt. So, Coops, you talk about the network. Do you see how Alex Dunne's network can expand right from his granddad all those years ago? But anyway, I did a driver development seminar at Mondello in 2018, I think it was. And Alex Dunne was there as a 12-year-old. Small little 12-year-old go-karter, had a copy of my book, Race to Win, which is all about driver development. And that's when I met him first. And I knew his dad, Noel, because Noel raced Formula Ford in Ireland. But he had the dream, and they were prepared to make sacrifices as a family and travel the world and try and raise the budget to give him an opportunity. But Alex Dunne, without a doubt, has the X factor. Without a doubt, you're going to see him in Formula One. Without a doubt, what he did last year in Formula 2 was almost unprecedented for a rookie. He got completely hosed by Formula 2, particularly in Belgium, when he won the race and they took it away from him because he didn't flick on some safety switch somewhere that made no difference to performance. But he is exceptional. He is, he is X factor without a doubt. Yeah,
he's he certainly is. You mentioned there, we talked about it a couple of times, the importance of having that group around you. Do you think that was the deciding factor in him leaving McLaren? Because he's spoken about it himself on a couple of interviews, particularly since the turn of the year, about needing to step away. And there seemed to have been some suggestion that maybe McLaren weren't going to get him into F1. Rumors floating around. I'm not going to give too much weight to them, but Zach Brown's plan for him was maybe more along the lines of IndyCar or their future WEC program. And obviously he wants F1, and rightly so. I think he's more than good enough for it. He doesn't yet have a sponsored drive, but there was some Red Bull helmet marquee shenanigans. So what does this year look like, and what does Alex's support network do for him this year to make sure that this year is an even better year for Formula 2, and that they're banging on the doors of F1 teams, because there's now 22 seats in F1.
So when he did FP1 for McLaren in Austria, do you remember what happened?
It was quick.
0.07 of a second slower than Piastri.
Yeah, it was very quick.
Have you ever seen a rookie driver do that? Ever?
No.
Never.
The last serious rookie to get an FP1 before Alex was Kimi Antonelli, and he smashed into a wall.
Right. It's unheralded. Never happened before. And so that's the type of X factor performance he is able to come up with. He's particularly good when he goes away from his own backyard. I always say that's X factor material, when you can take someone out of his own backyard and he can be successful. And so the decision to leave McLaren, he wanted a clear path to Formula One. It was not available. It was their decision to stay focused on Formula One. That's why they agreed to separate, and it was the best thing. And I bet you, well, I don't know, but you may well see him back at McLaren down the road. You never know what changes. They know how good he is, and it's only a matter of time. I believe it's only a matter of time till he's directly connected to Formula One and then full time in Formula One.
Well, we sincerely hope so. It's what was Furman? It was 2004. It was 22 years since the tricolour was in a Formula One race. Obviously, Alex brought it back last year, and it was great hearing Aaron in F2 last year. I was welling up a little bit. Felt very patriotic at that. But I sincerely hope so, because, well, he has a record to beat, doesn't he, of the most points scored in Formula One.
Right. And will somebody ever tell that British commentator when he shouts about, there's Alex Dunne, the first Irishman to ever win a Formula 2 race, and then the first Irishman to win 2 Formula 2.
Are you listening, Alex Jakes? You've been told. I hope he's listening. That'd be cool if he was listening. I want to finish it up very quickly, bringing it right back around to Formula One. I don't know how much you follow Formula One nowadays, but good, because that will make this next question easier. Obviously, this year, huge regulation changes. The car and the aerodynamics as well, so the engine and the aerodynamics. The first time that's happened 40 odd years or something like that, both at the same time. Lots of change this year. Anybody's guess. There's rumors of the Mercedes and Red Bull have stolen this march on the combustion engine, but at the same time the Merc wouldn't turn on for Alpine. Nobody knows. What are you most excited for Formula One this year, this new non-ground effect era of Formula One that we're getting into?
Well, I have to be slightly biased. I've lived in America more than 40 years. I'm fascinated by what's going to happen at Cadillac. Remember, I've known this before anybody ever knew it in Europe, because I'm very close to Mario Andretti,
who teased that on this show. We interviewed him a few years ago, and he teased exactly that about 7 or 8 months before it was confirmed to be a thing.
Yeah. And so the fact that he's involved, Mario is royalty to me still. And so there's an emotional tie to what Cadillac might do. And it is the hardest thing in sports is to become successful in Formula One. So it's going to be a fascinating trek to follow what's going on there. Then the new regulations. Yeah, we don't know. It doesn't matter who says what about what engine. We have no idea what's going to happen until it begins to happen and unfold. But the storylines, Adrian Newey, Aston Martin, Red Bull, Mercedes, Alpine. I mean, there's
Audi.
Yes, the storylines are everywhere. Formula One has never been as big around the world as it is today. And I just think we're in for a fascinating season. It's going to be amazing.
Netflix must be salivating about how much
Yeah.
money they'll make this year.
Yeah, I mean, they brought people behind the scenes at a level never seen before. So I mean, I can't wait for it to start. I went to Monaco last year and spent the weekend with Williams, and just to get up close and personal again and see what they do. It's even though I know it, I'm fascinated by it. Yeah. Anyway,
Coops, you'd one final one there.
I had one final question in regards to just this era in Formula One. Now, you've been around the sport from the 70s, probably, if you like
Yeah.
to think. What driver, if you could take them from any era and bring them to this era, do you think could adapt and actually perform well?
Yeah. See, it's an interesting question because I went through the slip and slide era of Formula One into ground effects. We went from slip and slide and balance and have a joy in driving a car on the limit to the brutal speed and stiff suspension of ground effects and sliding skirts. I didn't like that era. Then you had an era of precision where Michael Schumacher set standards. I'm going to be fitter than anybody that's ever driven a Formula One car. Remember, he had his blood test taken during a test to measure how much oxygen in his blood. That took it to new levels. And he was a machine, right? Then you had Lewis Hamilton, the sophistication, the feel, able to get yourself ahead of the game and stay ahead of it and stay emotionally at that level, unlike anybody's ever done before. Then you have Verstappen come in. He's got everything. He's got Schumacher and Senna and Hamilton. He's got it all rolled into the same package. So who could you bring in? I mean, I don't know whether Senna would like these cars. They're brutal. I don't know what next year's cars are going to be like. You have to have a driver with immense amount of spare capacity in your brain because you have 57 different things you can adjust now on a car in one lap. Can I ask you, have you heard Alex Dunne's radio for the FP1 that he did in Austria? Have you heard the broadcast of the whole thing?
Not the whole thing, no.
Okay, there's a radio broadcast. His dad just sent it to me. I must ask his dad to put it online. It is start to finish with all the editing, all the blank spaces taken out. But it's the radio from the start to the end of a session. It will absolutely blow you away, the information they give him and what they ask him to do. I mean, a normal person would be brain fried just to listen to that. And he's driving a Formula One car at the same time. And that's the level drivers have to now operate at. And I wish there was more seat of the pants stuff like there was in our era. Because it's so unbelievably technical now. Some of the fun of pure racing a car is not there with contemporary drivers like it was back in our era. Yeah. Anyway, Coop, I'm sorry I didn't answer your question. I'm still not sure what the answer would be.
I think that
many
says it
people
all.
could give an answer, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that's the most annoying thing for me when I talk to people that aren't as kind of in depth to Formula One as we are, and yourself, when they say, who's the greatest of all time? And I'm like, you don't understand the sport because the sport changes. You can't, like Daniel Ricciardo was amazing, never quite made it where he would have wanted to. Formula One retired him because Formula One moved away from what he could do and he couldn't adapt. It's trying to explain that from what I see.
Yeah.
And to someone who doesn't and go, but what do you mean? Like they're all driving cars? I'm like, it's not as simple as that. I do understand that you couldn't, but I think it would be easier I think it would be easier for like your Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton to go back.
Yeah.
And maybe race that way because then they would probably enjoy it more because, as you say, it's the seat of your pants driving rather than computers.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much. One final one for you. We always like to do this with our guests. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen this season, but if I gave you a fiver right now, who do you think is going to be the 2026 Formula One World Champion?
Piastri.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I like that a lot.
I like that.
That is a very good one. Listen, Derek, thank you so very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've been Everything Trackside. Check us out everywhere, all socials, and check out our sponsor, Slicks, as well. Slicksmag.com, use code ETS10 at checkout for 10% off. Issue 2 is out right now. Thank you again, Derek, so much. Thank you to my panel. We'll be back very, very soon. Thank you. Goodbye.